How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Well. Y'all, I am a professional, but I've apparently forgotten how to work a microphone today, let alone bring it in front of my face to talk to y'all. It was one of those days. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Well. Let's begin again. Yes. Well. The Democratic Party. Remember, their rise is inevitable. We've been told this. It's one of the research projects I did. I think it was, got to be like my senior year in college, not law school. The demography is destiny phrase relating to the Republican Party began in 1972. Richard Nixon won the White House in 1972. Re-election. Progressives were actually surprised that Richard Nixon won a re-election. Now, they'll say it was Watergate and all that stuff. You know, the deep irony of Watergate and what Nixon allowed to be done, the stealing of the campaign plans and the Watergate office, the Democratic Party and all that, was that he didn't need it. The Democrats had gone, they'd swung hard left. They were anti-crime. The Democratic Party of 1972 was about where the Democratic Party of today has gotten back to. And it was a blowout election for Richard Nixon. He won. He never needed to do the Watergate scandal. He never needed to figure out what the Democrats were going to do. He never needed to engage in the dirty tactics he engaged in. He was going to win because the American people were rejecting the Democrats. They had in 69. The Democrats doubled down in 72, and Nixon won. But the progressives who didn't know, remember the New York Times woman who said she didn't know a single person who had voted for Nixon? They doubled down, and they began in 1972 to console themselves with a mythology. The mythology was that the Democrats are inevitable. Very Borg-like, resistance is futile. Because the nation by 1972 is very clear, and it became more and more clear into the 80s and 90s, the nation was browning. White people, demographically, were not going to stay the majority of the country. White people in the country, their voting share was over time going to decline. In 1976, when Gerald Ford loses to Jimmy Carter, it was inevitable. It was proof. Ronald Reagan was just an anomaly. And, you know, the Democratic Party has every time, and we can go through them, and we should right now. Jimmy Carter was proof of the Republican decline. Ronald Reagan was an anomaly. Ronald Reagan was an anomaly based on the economic crisis of the 1970s, and then George H.W. Bush was a continuation of Reagan. And then when he lost, it was the ascendancy of the boomers and Bill Clinton, and decline of the Republican Party was, as predicted, going to happen with Al Gore's election in 2000. George W. Bush actually won, but he lost the popular vote. It was proof that actually the Democrats were on the rise. 2004 was a war machine anomaly, and it was stolen from the Democrats and John Kerry, and it was Ken Blackwell in Ohio who was to blame. And then Barack Obama was, of course, proof that the Democrats were inevitable and the Democrats were a permanent political majority, just like in California. And Donald Trump was the Russian stealing the election, and Joe Biden was a reversion to the mean. And oh my God, what happened in 2024? It turns out that Democratic ascendancy was always mythology. The Republican decline because of demography was always a mythology. The decline based on demographics is not real because over time, parties go through realignments. If you know anything about the history of the United States, our parties go through realignments every 80 to 100 years, and we are in a realignment period in this country. It's awkward for people. I mean, just look at me for example. Let me just use me as the example. I am a Christian evangelical conservative. I can't tell you the number of people who now think I'm a moderate or liberal. I haven't changed my positions. It's just that the party has moved towards Donald Trump, who's a populist. But a lot of people who called themselves conservatives have now moved into this populist camp, and they're like, you're not a conservative anymore. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? I haven't changed a single position. You people are now embracing like takeover of companies and all sorts of crazy economic theories on tariffs and stuff that no conservative would do. You're a populist. You just haven't recognized your label has changed. Mine hasn't. And I was like, where do I belong in the system? I'm still a Republican. I was an elected Republican. I supported Trump. I don't always agree with him on a number of issues, but I still prefer his policies to the other side. But oftentimes I feel politically homeless. The Democrats have, with the media, with the academy, with Hollywood, they have provided a bubble for the Democratic Party to be in, feel safe in, and never have to be confronted with the drifting of their ideas. They can turn on MSNBC or even CNN. They can read the New York Times or USA Today. They can watch their favorite TV shows, and they never have to see an incursion of contrary cultural values. And so they do not know that they are a party in decline. What was that movie? M. Night Shyamalan. No, not the famous one. Not Seeing Dead People. The Village. Yes. So M. Night Shyamalan has he doesn't have a lot of good movies. It's like I feel bad for the guy. M. Night Shyamalan was the guy who wrote The Sixth Sense. Bruce Willis and the kid sees dead people, and spoiler alert, Bruce Willis is dead the whole time. I know, you're shocked and angry. I gave you a spoiler for a 20-year-old movie. You weren't going to watch it anyway. Go back and watch it. M. Night Shyamalan, he had a lot of movies after that. That's his most famous, and it was all kind of downhill, but he had one that was actually pretty good called The Village. And it is essentially a Revolutionary War America. These people live in this agrarian society, and there are monsters in the woods. And so the society stays together in this agrarian society. They know there are other people in the area and other communities, but they got to stay there. And every once in a while, kids decide they want to leave and go in search of other people, and the monsters get them, or they come back because of the monsters. And it actually turns out that they're living in the 20th century, and they're in a park-like setting, in a preserve, and all the children are being raised by the adults to believe that they live in this pre-industrial agrarian society because the parents wanted to be done with civilization. They thought civilization was bad. And so a very wealthy person sets aside this land, and it's guarded by people, and it's a no-fly zone. So planes and helicopters never even fly over into the airspace. So the kids have no idea, but they're there. And it's the big reveal, the aha moment at the end. The monsters are actually the parents. And people who are kidnap the kids and do terrible things to keep the facade from being broken down. That is exactly The Village. The M. Night Shyamalan's The Village is the Democratic Party. The Democrats are in this commune, and there's an entire media apparatus, academic apparatus, and cultural apparatus designed so that no one can pierce the Democrat bubble, so that the Democrats never have to know they're in decline. It is, you go to CNN, you go to MSNBC, you go to the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, it's all liberals writing for liberals, talking to liberals, persuading liberals their worldview is correct. You would think CNN in particular, a network that claims to be really the fair and balanced network, would actually have more voices than Scott Jennings, and actually might have some anchors who reflect the worldview of a Scott Jennings, who recognize the world is more complex and the world does not bend towards progressivism, and yet they don't. So here today comes the New York Times with a big story that it turns out, let me just read you the opening sentence of the piece. The Democratic Party is hemorrhaging voters long before they even go to the polls. The headline is, the Democratic Party faces a voter registration crisis. The party is bleeding support beyond the ballot box, new analysis shows. Here's the thing about the South. In 1980, Ronald Reagan started picking up southern states against who? James Earl Carter, favored son of Georgia. Republicans started winning gubernatorial seats in the South. They started picking up state legislative seats in the South. They started picking up congressional seats in the South. In 1994, there was a big flip with Bill Clinton as the catalyst because of his values in the White House, deeply ironic now compared to Donald Trump, where a lot of Southern Democrats decided, you know what, I'm actually a Republican. I'm not one of these crazy liberals. And at the federal level, they started voting Republican, but at the state level, they continued to vote Democrat. It wasn't until George Bush in 2001, after 9/11, that the cultural shock at the federal level transcended to the state level. But here's the thing. Democratic voter registration in the South stayed very strong for a very long time, even after people had started voting Republican. Only then did you start seeing this real collapse of Democratic Party registration. But it was a lagging indicator. It wasn't in the foreground. It was in the background. People had already started voting Republican. They just hadn't changed their voter registration. Well, guess what? Same thing's happening now. Of the 30 states that track voter registration by political party, Democrats lost ground to Republicans in every single one between 2020 and 2024, often by a lot. That 4-year swing toward the Republicans adds up to 4.5 million voters, a deep political hole that could take years for Democrats to climb out of. The stampede away from the Democratic Party is occurring in battleground states, the bluest states, and the reddest states, too, according to a new analysis of voter registration data by the New York Times. The analysis used voter registration data compiled by L2, a nonpartisan data firm. For measurements, few measurements reflect the luster of a political party's brand more clearly than the choice by voters to identify with it. Whether they register on a clipboard, in a supermarket parking lot, at the Department of Motor Vehicles, or in the comfort of their own homes, and fewer Americans are choosing to be Democrats. In fact, for the first time since 2018, more new voters nationwide choose to be Republican than Democrat last year. There are still more Democrats registered nationwide, but that's partly because of blue states like California allowing people to register by party, while red states like Texas do not. But the trajectory is troublesome for Democrats. Democrats went from nearly an 11-point edge over Republicans on Election Day 2020 to just over a 6-point edge in 2024. The swing helps explain President Trump's success last year. The shift also previewed Democratic weakness in 2024. All 4 presidential battlegrounds showed significant Democratic erosion. Donald Trump won them all. In North Carolina, Republicans erased roughly 95% of the registration advantage Democrats held in 2020. In Nevada, Democrats suffered the steepest percentage point plunge of any state but West Virginia between 2020 and 2024. The share of voters choosing to register with either party went down after the state adopted automatic voter registration, but the Democrat decline allowed Republicans to briefly surpass Democrats. Top Democratic strategists say the party's nationwide registration decline is a hidden in plain sight crisis that must be reversed. By the way, you want to know the punchline of all of this? You know what Democrats have been doing in the past? They've been overwhelmingly targeting Black and Hispanic voters for voter registration. The thinking of the Democratic donors now is stop registering non-white people. The Democrats now want to go find college-educated white women to register to vote. They don't want Black people. They don't want Hispanic people. They certainly don't want Asian people either. They're trending Republican as well. The Democrats are giving up on non-white voters. They're trying to become the lily white party. And what did they say starting in 1972? Republicans were the party in decline because they were the party of white people. And now the Democrats, to save themselves, are trying to become the party of white people, particularly white women. It's a massive, massive shift. This is actually kind of funny. There is Aaron Strauss, a data scientist who spent years working to elect Democrats, wrote that the old way of registering voters, working through nonprofits, enrolling young people and people of color in general rather than explicitly seeking Democrats, could backfire. Mr. Strauss argued the left needed to target its new voters more surgically because Mr. Trump's support was growing among traditional Democrat constituencies. Registering voters without regard to their political beliefs remains cost-effective for Democrats only with Black voters. With other Democratic groups, explicitly partisan groups, ought to make explicit partisan arguments. There's just a problem. They're nonprofits. You're not allowed to. Only those groups expressly affiliated with the Democratic Party are legally allowed to do that, or the Republican Party. Nonprofit groups can't discriminate in voter registration. That's the law. And they've got Donald Trump in the White House that will aggressively enforce that law should the Democrats try otherwise. This is a problem of the Democrats on making. As they've gotten rich, white, and woke, no one wants to be a part of the party. Greetings and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Delighted to have you with me. Well, the redistricting war data comes to fruition. This is from, now this comes, keep in mind, on the heels of this story about the Democratic Party's nationwide decline. And now Gavin Newsom claims he's going to redistrict in California. Here's an interesting thing. Gavin Newsom has been sending out massive fundraising appeals about his redistricting fight in California, and he hasn't actually targeted Californians. He's targeting everyone else. He's also online now mimicking Donald Trump in his Twitter style, and the left's like, oh, this is so good. He's forcing them to confront their hypocrisy. That's just kind of dumb. He's had people now, his social media people, putting up pictures of him versus J.D. Vance from when they were in high school. But here's the thing. They stop at high school. Why? Because the next picture is J.D. Vance in a Marine uniform being willing to die for his country, and Gavin Newsom not. Interestingly enough, when you see the pictures of J.D. Vance, who, by the way, he'll be in Atlanta tomorrow. They're not saying where yet. He's going to Peachtree City, Georgia, which is south of the city, the golf cart capital of America. And he's going to highlight somehow the president's tax plan is helping small businesses. But, when they put up these pictures of kind of dweeby J.D. Vance from high school versus handsome Gavin Newsom, if you watched any of the movies from the 80s or 90s, it was the handsome D-bag was always wound up being the villain of the movie. So I'm not sure why they want to highlight that. It was always the goofy-looking guy who wound up being the hero of the movies. Nonetheless, as we get into redistricting, even the Washington Post now is screaming at Democrats, don't do this, don't do this. You're going to lose big if you do this. We've run the data. You're going to lose if you do this, California. And they are. Americans for Prosperity is actually building a massive army of conservative activists to take on this challenge next year and mobilize conservatives to fight for freedom in the country. They'd love to have you on their side. All you have to do is go to afpvolunteer.com. Americans for Prosperity also wants you to take their 250,000 step challenge. You individually don't have to take 250,000 steps, just take one step. And if 250,000 people take a step for freedom in this country, we measurably improve this country, and in time for the country's 250th anniversary next July 4th. It's wild to think we as a nation are 250 years old, and yet there are nations thousands of years old still out there. We're a young nation still. Show the young spirit for freedom. Join Americans for Prosperity. Go to afpvolunteer.com today. afpvolunteer.com. Be engaged in the fight for freedom in the United States with Americans for Prosperity. They're a fantastic group. They will get you involved in the fight for freedom at afpvolunteer.com. Greetings. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be happy to have you. We talked about the divisions, the Democratic Party. The Democrats aren't just a party in decline nationwide with voters. They're a party that is becoming increasingly divided. Now, let me explain this to you because I have some background experience in this from having been on CNN for 3 years and even Fox for 5 years. The national media, and that includes Republican-oriented media like Fox, they're predisposed to focus on divisions and challenges within the Republican Party. I don't know that you guys know even how behind the scenes at Fox, there are actually way more people on the left in the production spots than you might think. The on-air staff, very conservative. The immediate staff, very conservative, but a lot of the production people, not necessarily ideologically aligned. It's definitely more to the right, but even behind the scenes, you go to foxnews.com, You'll be amazed at the number of stories on trans issues where they use the preferred pronouns instead of actually calling the girl. And that's an editorial standard, not just an adoption of the AP. And it's worse everywhere else. But one of the sideline products of this is that the news generally is predisposed to focus on divisions within the Republican Party, not divisions within the Democratic Party. Think about now how Republicans are generally aligned. And Donald Trump has a lot to do with this. He is a force of nature in politics. But Republicans are largely aligned on abortion. Republicans are largely aligned on trans issues. Republicans are largely aligned against the left in this country. Republicans are generally aligned on opposition to China. We in the media highlights opposition and divisions in Ukraine, things like that, economic divisions that are spilling out within the Republican Party that may be exaggerated, although Howard Lutnick pushing socialism is not a good thing. Peronista propaganda. It's very interesting. The Democratic Party, however, they don't focus on the divisions. Here's a growing division of the Democratic Party. This is from Punchbowl News, which is I'm not a big fan of the name, but at the same time, it's a one of the more comprehensive sites of what's going on Capitol Hill. These are the people who used to actually do the playbook at Politico, and they got very, very good, and they wanted to be as straight as they possibly could, but Politico got co-opted by the left, as a lot of news entities do, and so these guys left and started Punchbowl, and they're Jake Sherman and his crew. They're pretty good at it, and they're highlighting a major division within the Democratic Party, a moment of reckoning, they call it, over something where the Republicans are pretty united and the Democrats are not. How to approach U.S. support for Israel amid the seemingly never-ending war in Gaza and the humanitarian crisis facing Palestinians. Nowhere in the country are the divisions more pronounced than in the party's messiest Senate primary in a must-win state for Democrats in 2026. The open Senate seat in Michigan, a state Donald Trump won in 2024, has triggered an intense battle that morphed into a proxy fight over the future of the Democratic Party. Haley Stevens, Democrat of Michigan, a congresswoman, has been the favorite for Democratic leadership, is doubling down in defense of Israel. State Senator Mallory McMorrow and former Michigan health official Abdul El-Sayed, to varying degrees, say Democratic voters want their leaders to reconsider what's been a reflexively pro-Israel stance by both parties. El-Sayed, a 40-year-old doctor who ran unsuccessfully for governor in 2018, was a prominent booster of the uncommitted movement during the Democratic primary last year. El-Sayed saw it as a way to pressure Biden to change his support for Israel's war in Gaza. Now, here's an interesting one that I missed. Catherine Clark in Washington, who is the House Minority Whip, which means she is the second highest ranking Democrat in the House. She referred to what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. Now, she's a radical wackadoo leftist who has some kid who joined Antifa. AI PAC has not walked back their endorsement because she walked back her genocide. She scrambled to say, I didn't really mean it that way. I didn't really mean it that way. Well, in Michigan, the preferred Democrat for the Senate race, Haley Stevens, is doubling down on defense of Israel. She says she's staying consistent. She said she would have opposed the Senate Israel resolution. I would not have voted for that legislation, in part because I don't think that was the solution to getting this war to end, getting the hostages to come home, building towards a lasting peace, and getting Hamas to surrender. She flipped a Trump district, and then in redistricting, she had to run against Andy Levin of Michigan, who was more critical of Israel, and AI PAC backed her, and she's doubling down. Now, one of her other competitors, this McMorrow, is urging AI PAC to stay out of the primary. Mike Rogers is on the Republican side. He's got Trump's endorsement. He was the guy who came close last time. He lost, but barely. And he is stridently in support of Israel. See, here's the problem for the Democratic Party. They've been coddling progressives for so long. Increasingly, leadership in Washington is trying to find ways to be critical of Israel without distancing themselves from Israel. I mean, Chuck Schumer is Jewish. He's a big proponent of Israel and an Israeli state for Jews to live in. He's not going to walk away from Israel, but he's got to give lip service to condemning Netanyahu. And the left is figuring out this game. So let me explain to you what the Democrats do. In order to not divide on this issue for a long time, what the Democrats have been doing is saying, we oppose the Netanyahu regime, and they use the word regime. We support Israel. We oppose Netanyahu. The people of Israel don't want this. Netanyahu does. Netanyahu bad. Israel good. But along come the progressives who are clued in on the game. And increasingly, progressives want what? A Palestinian state from river to sea. From river to sea, which means the end of Israel. They're not supporting half measures. This is the problem for the Democrats as well on trans issues, is it not? No half measures by the progressive activists. So the Democrats want to be able to say, yes, we agree, boys should not be in girls' spaces, but if a parent wants to transition their child, we should allow them. We should say sports are for your sex identity, not gender identity, but transition should be fine. They want to split the baby. They want to try to disarm themselves with suburban parents who are worried that boys may start taking girls' scholarships. And progressives will give them no space on this. Nancy Pelosi the other day said that she absolutely is thoroughly convinced that kids need to be allowed to transition, and that if you transition early enough, you should be allowed to get into the space of a child of a different gender. Most suburban parents of girls trying to get their girls' college scholarships are doing so in sports. They pick sports that, whether it's softball or golf or tennis or even riflery, things like that where schools are looking for ways to give scholarships to girls. They go in and here comes a boy to compete and parents are appalled. But progressives are not, because progressives believe that boys can become girls. Progressives believe it's just magic. It is a by faith belief that a boy can become a girl or a girl can become a boy. And progressives believe that the way you enforce this by faith belief is the punishment of blasphemers who reject it. Look at the three boys I talked about in Loudoun County, Virginia yesterday in a locker room complaining about a girl being present. The girl breaks the rules by videotaping the boys in the bathroom locker room. She does not get punished. They get punished for objecting to her being there. Progressives give no half measure to this. What the Democrat position, what they want it to be, is that, look, the girl shouldn't be there, but we should respect her right to transition to become a boy. She's clearly going through something. We should show utmost empathy. You know, you can show empathy without actually caving. You can be sympathetic without bending over backwards to embrace. But to progressives, you can't. They've weaponized empathy. Was it Joel Rickner has a book out about empathy and how empathy is kind of a modern concept that was derived in the 60s, where we don't want to be sympathetic to someone. We just want to understand what someone's going through. And I actually agree with that. Now, he's very critical of the concept. I'm not. We should understand what someone's going through in life. We should try to examine when we're opposed to someone, when we disagree with them. Well, let's at least understand if we can see it from their frame of mind. What are they going through? The problem is, what the left wants you to do is, once you've understood what they're going through, because you're empathetic to them, you must give them license to do it. That's where I draw the line. I can understand that someone is going through mental stress, mental issues. They believe that transitioning is the way to do it. And I can still say, no, that's not it. That's not right. The left, however, it's all or nothing every time. It's all or nothing on, you got to support the Palestinians and Hamas. You can't support Israel. It's all or nothing on transgenderism. It's all or nothing on economic policy. It's all or nothing on war. It's all or nothing on Christians involved in public services. They got to sue the nuns. They got to sue the bakers. They got to sue the photographers. They got to sue the florists. You will be made to care. and Americans are tired of being bullied by the left. So here in Michigan is the dividing line, and it's shaping up to be a big one, support for Israel. More and more people on the left are vilifying AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Affairs Committee. It's actually a great organization. It is highly influential in Washington, D.C., and it is very well funded. And it is the part of all sorts of conspiracy theories on the far left and the far right. Anti-Semites on both sides despise AIPAC. It's actually a great group. It's a very influential group. But there's a dividing line on the left now. You can't be down with AIPAC. You can't do it. You're not allowed to. If you do it, it's bad because they're Jews, and you can't like the Jews. That's where the left is these days. It's this really, really insane breakdown. It is a genuinely insane division in the Democratic Party premised on anti-Semitism. And the progressives will not allow half measures. You are no longer allowed as a Democratic leader to say you support Israel but hate Netanyahu. You got to hate Israel too. And it's breaking up that party. It's becoming an issue in primaries. And unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for the progressives, they're losing these primaries because most voters, including those who are still remnants in the Democratic Party, they're like, no, this is crazy. I'm not going to go along with this. It reminds me there's a guy out there who he's in a very progressive denomination, and he claims, I'm actually kind of suspicious of him. He claims that he's a evangelical, inerrant Word of God guy, and he just refuses to leave his liberal denomination, and he's going to bring it back to the right. And I don't actually necessarily think the guy is, but you kind of see that with some Democratic Party people. They're like, I'm not leaving this party. I was here before them. I'm not leaving. Well, no, the party's leaving you, buddy. That's the problem. And right now the party's cracking up because the progressives are the people who write the biggest checks in the Democratic Party, and they're dividing the party from its base. I want to divide you from stinky odors. You can separate yourself from them with the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them for less than $200, saving $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3. You go to EdenPureDeals.com, you'll see a radio show host box, and you put in the promo code ERICK3, the number 3. And you get 3 of them. They're air purifiers, so they get rid of dust, they get rid of pollen, they get rid of mildew floating in the air. They also get rid of 99.9% of bacteria and viruses floating in the air that get pulled through the machine with the generation of plasma. And then they eliminate the odors. They generate ozone, flows out into the space where you're running them. Ozone particles, they're O3 particles. They're unstable oxygen particles. Oxygen likes to be O2, not O3. It wants to give up that extra atom of oxygen. And when you hit the ionized odor particle, it gives up that one and it eliminates the odor, wipes it out. No odor can stand up to it. It's just science. You go to EdenPureDeals.com and you use the discount code ERIC3, ERICK3, and you can get 3 of them and save $200. Hello, my friends. 877-973-7425 is the phone number. Let's go to Dan calling from Apopka, Florida. Welcome to the show, sir, if I can actually push the button there. Well, how are you?
Well, I'm good, except I just started to eat my lunch. And I knew you were going to pick up.
I did it on purpose, Dan. I've been watching. You just didn't realize.
I know. Big Brother's out there. Hey, are you going to address the CAFE standard rollbacks for diesel engines? Because that, my friend, is a huge deal.
Yeah, so I actually talked about that the other day a little bit on the show.
Oh, okay.
And it actually is a huge deal in large part because the way they did it is in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they can't actually roll it back per se. So what they did was say, if you ignore the standards, you're not going to get fined by the government anymore. That's how they did it in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Completely guts the CAFE standards essentially, and it is massive for diesel engines, for gas engines. It's a huge deal for everybody right now.
Well, I drive a truck for a living. I own a diesel pickup. My diesel pickup is 20 years old because I did not want DEF. I didn't want an EGR valve, all of that nonsense. This is going to save trucking companies huge amounts of money. Owner-operators are going to be able to get back in the space and make a decent living. The majority of problems with heavy trucks, with light-duty trucks, has been the implementation of these standards, the DEF system, all of these things. So I just, it seems like it's under the radar. I haven't heard a whole lot about it from, national media, but I didn't really expect to. But it just gives me so much hope going forward. I may actually buy a new truck in a couple of years if I don't have to buy all that garbage.
So now here's the thing. And look, Dan, I appreciate the phone call. I'll let you get to your lunch as well. Here's the thing. Be careful on this because, they got rid of the penalties. And they were able to roll back some of the rules related to CAFE standards. They repealed, for example, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration rules on CAFE standards. But because it's a penalties rollback, there may be some hesitancy. If they can rush them, if manufacturers can rush them, I think that is great. Sidley Austin, which is a major prominent law firm, actually has a legal analysis out saying that it means manufacturers can produce those vehicles without worrying about the penalties, and allegedly, from what I've read online, advised their clients, which are some of the automotive companies, that you can go for it. I hope that's the case because you're absolutely right. It will allow meaningful cost savings for a lot of trucking companies. It will improve the caliber of the trucks, and that'll ultimately be costs passed on to consumers, which is a good thing, reduction in costs passed on to consumers, as opposed to the tariffs, which are now being expanded on more aluminum and steel products. And major American companies are coming out, including soft drink companies coming out today, saying expect prices to start going up next month because of the tariffs on aluminum cans and things like that. Companies are passing costs on to consumers at this point. When we come back, I want to look at a bunch of different media stories that are completely unrelated, but every single one of them was wrong. And let's see if we can play spot the pattern with the media making mistakes in how they tell the news. It's kind of eye-opening. When you do it this way, you can obviously guess where this leads, but it's worth doing the exercise together when we come back.